What's up, Penn Staters? Welcome to the Football Letter Podcast. This week, we welcome standout volunteer leader Andrew Flatley. Andrew is a 2019 Penn State grad, and he is currently the communications chair for our Greater Boston chapter. I knew Andrew when he was a student at Penn State, very much involved in athletics and the student experience, and has now become a standout volunteer leader for us, as I mentioned. Professionally, Andrew is a national account segment manager for Armstrong World Industries. We're going to talk with Andrew about how the Greater Boston chapter unites Penn Staters during the football season. Maybe we'll even ask him about some Penn State hoops. Who knows? So, Andrew, welcome to the Football Letter Podcast. We're so glad you joined us. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Really excited for it and having a great week so far.
That's great. As we said before we started recording, I can't believe you've been out of school for 5 years, but I've known Andrew for a while. I actually saw him at Beaver Stadium on game day over the last couple of seasons. So good to catch up with you here. Andrew, you grew up in Pennsylvania. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what Penn State meant to you growing up? How did it become the school for you, and maybe some early impressions of the University Park campus?
Yeah, so my dad actually graduated from Penn State himself. So growing up as a child, of course, we were going up to Penn State football games together as a family, which were some of my fondest memories. I remember always being excited those couple weeks before a game was coming up to travel with the whole family and check out the scene. And I just kind of knew from there that there really was only ever one school for me. It went from going up for just the game to then going up for a weekend. Experiencing the whole, atmosphere of State College in the town and just falling in love with it. So when it came time to do college visits, I did a couple others, but Penn State was where it was going to be and where it ended up going. So went to University Park in 2015 and graduated in 19.
So somewhat of a familiar story, family members who are Penn State grads. I mean,
Yep.
Were you hearing Penn State stories growing up? Because sometimes we hear students say, oh, yeah, he'll be class of, 20 plus years from now. Was that kind of the case for you?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody in my family knew I'd be making my way up there eventually. So when it did happen, it was kind of the destiny came true. So it was fantastic to get that acceptance letter and make my way up to State College as a freshman and stay on East Halls.
So this is the Football Letter Podcast, but we'll ask you a little bit about Penn State hoops here before we get into the football, because I know you were heavily involved with the student section of men's basketball, the Legion of Blue. What were some things? How did that experience as a student leader? Maybe that's a good place to start. How did that one enrich your overall student experience at Penn State?
Yeah, it's definitely where I met my best friends. We all kind of met up in the fall of 2015 when it was time to get ready for the basketball season, and they were talking about rebranding, and that's kind of right when I was shuffling in there myself and was able to make a lifelong group of friends that really had the same passion for Penn State that I did, the same energy, and the want and the need to do our best to propel the basketball program to the next level. So started out with them in the fall of 2015 and worked my way up to eventually be the president of the club, which was fantastic. We went to the NIT championship. I remember you traveled up on the student bus with us, John, which was awesome my junior year. But working with, PJ Mullen, Pat Chambers, the whole crew, it was a really awesome 4 years that I got to spend with Legion of Blue and Penn State, and really what made me want to continue helping to grow, the verbiage as to how great Penn State is in areas outside of Pennsylvania. So when I did make the move up to Boston after graduation, I knew getting involved in the alumni chapter was something I was going to do, and I'm thrilled to be doing it. And meeting all these different recent alumni that have been out for a little while, and just sharing that same experience of how much we love Penn State.
Yeah, I remember that bus ride to New York City. That was a fun trip. You guys were really good sports with kind of just letting me hang out and tell a little bit of your story. But the way you answer that question is a perfect segue, because I think you can draw a direct leadership line, and not just leadership, but also kind of an enthusiasm, passionate enthusiasm for Penn State. So when you did, graduate from Penn State, when you started, your professional career, how did you first get involved with the Greater Boston chapter?
So the easiest way was just finding where they do their football game watches. So it was kind of perfectly working out that right when the COVID regulations were working down is when I was finally able to get out and start doing stuff. that's when football season was kicking off, that Wisconsin game in 2021, and, found their Facebook group, saw they were going to the greatest bar in downtown Boston, and went there, started talking to the leadership group that was, helping to run the event. And that's what kind of got my foot in the door to eventually, work my way up and become our communications chair.
What stands out to you about those initial meetings with the chapter in terms of, I don't want to say, you were surprised because, as you know, there are Penn Staters everywhere, but how important was it to initially make that first connection kind of with Penn Staters in the area and then grow from there?
Yeah, it was really important. Growing up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I didn't know anybody in the greater Boston area at all when I was moving up here. I was kind of coming in blind, and being able to go to that game watch and have those initial conversations with the leadership board of the chapter really helped me to boost my confidence of moving to an area that I wasn't super familiar with, and being able to just talk about stuff that we all could relate to. Where did we spend our Friday nights? What did we do before football games? Where was our favorite class building? It was really good to be able to go to that event and talk to hundreds of people that you had at least one thing in common with, to kind of get that started.
Yeah, that's a great point, Andrew. And so we talk with volunteer leaders all the time. They'll move to Chicago, they'll move to Austin, they'll move to North Carolina, and they will literally say, I didn't know anyone. And the first thing that they did was reach out to the chapter. And so, another great example. And it also has, it sounded like it had an impact for you in terms of, moving to a new area, meeting Penn Staters, but also just meeting people who you had a connection with. Networking, I guess, what was the impact for you beyond, yes, I'm connecting with Penn Staters, this is great, but was there a carryover effect in that you were also starting to kind of like build confidence, build a network? Did you see other areas of your life where maybe those positive effects were spilling over?
Yeah, I definitely think it even helped out with my work relationship as well. There's a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds that are in our chapter up here. So being able to converse with them, learn who's in a similar industry, who can help me kind of meet other people that are in the same industry as me, really helped to take off on that front. And I really don't know how, if I was coming up here and maybe wasn't involved with the alumni chapter, or maybe went to a different school that didn't have as big of a presence, how would I have gotten that started for myself when I did move up here? So being able to just meet more people and network and grow within that was a huge benefit for me.
All right, Andrew, let's talk some football on game day. We're here. I'm talking with Andrew here on August 8th. We'll share the interview once we get into the season. Game day, greater Boston area. One, what is game day like for the chapter? How do you make your chapter watch parties welcoming, and just sort of maybe like if I'm at a greater Boston chapter watch party, what's the vibe like? And we'll throw some photos up on the screen that will show kind of like what the chapter does year round.
Yeah, it is a fantastic experience. So we have our game watches at a place called the Greatest Bar that you see on the screen right here. Greatest Bar is right down the street from TD Garden, so it's a big Celtics bar. But over the football season, it is a Penn State football bar, and we love working with their crew. As you saw in the picture earlier, it's a big first floor and then a balcony that wraps around the second floor. We can fit a couple hundred people in there. And for big games like the whiteout, or, even against a team on the road, we always have a big presence there. And what we do is we do our best to kind of imitate the Beaver Stadium pregame introduction, getting the Lion King, Crazy Train, all that stuff going on, get the energy and the atmosphere upbeat. When we score a touchdown, of course, we got Zombie Nation. I bring my cowbell, so we get to rock that a little bit. This year we are introducing specialty shots. So, each month we're going to change it up a little bit and give a new specialty shot offering for people with some proceeds going to our Night of Hope fundraiser. And it's just really a good time to spend a Saturday with a bunch of Penn Staters. I used to, before I was involved with the chapter, during that COVID time, would watch the games by myself in my apartment, and it was fine. But being able to spend time with people that are so passionate about the same thing as you, it gets loud in there. When a big touchdown scored, the energy is really unmatched, and I couldn't imagine doing it anywhere else. The Greatest Bar and the Boston chapter are thrilling to spend a Saturday afternoon with.
That's the name of the bar, the Greatest Bar.
It's called the Greatest Bar. When I'm sending out an email to all of our, recent graduates that are coming in. And I have to make sure I include, yes, that's the name of the bar. I'm not just calling it the greatest bar, but it is a really great bar. They have done really good things for us for a really long time. And we're excited to keep working with them.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And for folks listening, we've heard this story where businesses love Penn Staters because, as you said, there will be a large crowd.
Yep.
And so, a lot of times it's when you can kind of make those connections and have a standing place so people know where to go every week on game day. Obviously, it sounds like a lot of fun. Do you also use game day as an opportunity for folks who are maybe learning about the chapter for the first time or saying, hey, we're also having this event in the spring, we're doing this for THON? How much of an opportunity do you and the board members take on game day in terms of, we've got so many Penn Staters here, let's maybe talk about the chapter a little bit and get more folks involved with what we're doing maybe year round?
Yeah, 100%. The game watch parties are definitely our biggest opportunity to get our name out there and get our event, our future event information out there. Being that we have a DJ with the greatest bar, he has a microphone, and we make sure that, when the game starts at halftime every game, we're talking about our upcoming events, sign up for our newsletter, join our Facebook group, really making sure that we hit it home that, we want to welcome them at not only the game watches, but all the other events that we have around the greater Boston area all year round. So those game watches are really a good conduit to get our name out there and really boost our attendance at other events, such as our THON fundraiser that we have later in the year.
You are tuned into the Football Letter podcast. We are talking with Andrew Flatley, 2019 Penn State grad, communications chair for our greater Boston chapter. Their watch parties are at the greatest bar. That's the real name of the bar. They've got a great relationship, a lot of space there. So you mentioned the cowbell. That's apparently that's a thing at a lot of, I was going to say, no, you actually do have it by you.
I have it right here, ready to go for the season.
So how soon will you start prepping for the season for the cowbell, or can you just roll out of bed on game day and have the
I think it's going to be a week one, game one, when I'm at the bar kind of deal. I think it'll come naturally. I think I might practice a little bit, but it is something that I really enjoy doing. I did it a lot as a student and I kind of missed it. So getting involved with the chapter and being the cowbell guy is really cool now.
Yeah, we need to get a shirt that says the cowbell guy.
The cowbell guy, yeah.
So we're laughing, we're having some fun, but I think that there are also some really, I think it underscores things that are serious for you in terms of you're serious about your passion for Penn State, you're serious about your service to Penn State. Just on a personal level, why was it important to keep your Penn State connection going even after you graduated?
Yeah, I think two things is, one, because it is so much of a passion for me, it almost had to come naturally. Like, it was almost the next step for me is, all right, even though I'm not physically there, how do I keep talking about this school? How do I keep showing others that it can have the same impression on them that it did on me? And the second thing was, I almost felt like not that I owed the school to be a leader on the Alumni Association, but I feel like I almost did in a sense. The 4 years that I spent there were absolutely incredible. Again, I met my best friends. It really is where I became myself and I developed my personality that I'm happy with today. And it almost just felt like, the school did so much for me. The least I can do is talk about how great it is when I help to host a football game watch party. So it was, it almost was something that was just the next step.
So Andrew, a lot of times we know the power of volunteers hearing from fellow volunteers, from their peers. If there's a Penn Stater listening or watching and they want to get involved, but they just haven't maybe, started yet, what would be some advice from you to them about maybe just, a way to get started or the value in once you do get started? Andrew, let me repeat that question for a second. Yeah. Okay. So, Andrew, for a Penn Stater who hasn't yet gotten involved with their local chapter, what's the value for them? What's some advice that you have for them in terms of, here's a couple ways that you can get started. And then once you do get started, maybe you can start small and then grow it from there.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is probably go on your local chapter's, website, or a lot of them have a Facebook group. So find those sites. Just go to whatever event they have coming up next. Go to a random baseball game or community service event, there's bound to be at least a couple of their leadership board members at that event, and just get the conversation going. Tell them that you're kind of new to the area, or you've been in the area a little bit, but are starting to want to get more involved. And everybody that I've met so far within the Alumni Association has been incredibly welcoming. So just give them your background, tell them what you're looking for, and there will be ways that they'll help you to get involved. That'll be at a comfort level for you. They're not going to immediately say, all right, you're going to be our vice president. They're going to, maybe have you help out with a couple events coming up in the future, or, maybe join the leadership board as kind of a general executive member, if that makes sense. So I think just keeping the communication up, going to at least one event, and talking to some of the people that help run the chapter is a great first way to start. And it's really easy. Like, again, we all have that one thing in common. That's our love for Penn State. So as long as you can talk about that, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's well said, Andrew. And if you're living in the Northeast or in the Boston area, it's psuboston.org. We've
Correct.
got the URL on the screen, and we'll also share it when we share the episode. So, Andrew, I want to give you a chance to brag about the chapter a little bit. What are a couple highlights, that the chapter has throughout the year? Just maybe, a few points of pride that the chapter has, whether it's during football season or year round. You mentioned the THON fundraiser. I'm just wondering, what are you doing year round to connect Penn Staters?
Yeah, I think our biggest highlight would be that THON fundraiser. We call it our THON Night of Hope. And there's some other chapters around the country that do it. I believe New York, Philadelphia, and maybe Atlanta do similar ideas. But it's a big, basically a formal banquet that we have. Traditionally, we've had it in April or May, but it's an opportunity for us to bring in, big dollar auction items. We rent out a bar or a formal event space for a couple hours, give people to do the option to do a silent auction, donate money to the chapter, to the chapter, which then goes to THON. This year, as you can see right there, we raised $11,000, but a lot of our events throughout the year lead up to help put on this event. So at the football games, we're going to do a 50-50 raffle every week where, the winner takes home, 50% of the profits, and then 50% is going to go towards putting on the Night of Hope. We also do a THON trivia event, which has traditionally been in January, also at the Greatest Bar, where, we'll run a hour and a half, 2 hour long trivia session. Again, people can purchase raffle items, make donations. It's just a good time to spend time with other Penn Staters in January when maybe there's not a lot of things going on that time of year, but B, all the proceeds from that night go to our chat, or go to the Night of Hope, which goes to THON. The picture you see right there, in the past couple of years, we've done a Holiday Lights trolley party cruise. We've started to change the name to, because we thought it was just you sit on the bus and you look at lights around the city. But our first year doing it, we learned from the trolley liaison that it's a party trolley. So you bring some snacks, you bring some drinks, you pump up the music, and you bounce all around Boston for a couple hours, which is a lot of fun. We do brewery tours around the city. We do our student send off every August, which is where we will, and that's the photo that you see right there. All of the incoming freshman students that are going to be heading off to Penn State, we'll do a nice little ice cream social for them. We'll talk to them and their families, and that's really a good chance for the families to be able to interact with each other. And, Penn State mom can meet another Penn State mom, but also just for the students, where I grew up in Pennsylvania, I think we had 20 or 30 kids from my graduating class going to Penn State. So I knew I was going to know people there. An area like, the greater Boston area, not quite as many, just because we're not as close to Penn State. So it gives them the opportunity to, maybe they don't know somebody from their school that's going to Penn State, their high school, but they'll meet somebody in the same area that they know when they get to Penn State, they're going to have at least one or two connections for their freshman year to kick off, which I think is really important and a really good thing for them to do. So those are just a couple of the high level events that we've done over the last couple of years, and we're always looking for something new. One thing we're interested in checking out at some point is what they call Paddle Boston. It's where you get kayaks and you start up, at one end of the Charles River, float down in your kayaks and end up, downtown. So we're always looking for new ideas, do new things. And it's going to be a fun football season and fun next couple months after that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely will be a fun season. Sounds like there's a lot of fun things up ahead for the Greater Boston chapter. Just wanted to take a moment and maybe pause a little bit and just say, I think the student send-off events are fantastic, and as much fun as they are, they're also helpful. The show's producer Vince Lungaro and I we attended one in northern Jersey in
Oh,
2019,
nice.
and
Yep.
you were right. Like, the incoming students got together, the parents got together, and it helps
Yep.
that. And also just want to say congrats on the THON fundraising. I know that,
Thank
you
you.
guys are volunteers, and I know that, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And so, yeah, just wanted to take a moment and say, thank you. And also say congratulations.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's a whole team effort. Our board consists of 10 people. We all work really hard, to make sure that we're spreading the Penn State love, doing what we can to give back to THON. And it really is a passion for all of us. So we all, many hands make light work.
So you said something, or you touched on something that I thought was interesting when you were talking about advice on how to get started. I was wondering if maybe you could look at, your ascension in the Greater Boston chapter. How did you go from, going to that first event, meeting a few folks, deciding that this was something that you wanted to be involved in, and then, gradually working your way up to the communications chair?
Yeah. So after that first football game, they ended up having a brewery tour, which I'm always a big fan of. So got to go to that and meet some more of the leadership team, and just kept the conversation up. Like, hey, new to the area, I'm really not involved outside of my job. Really haven't gotten involved in anything yet. Do you guys see anything that could be a good fit for me, kind of as an introduction role? And at that time, they said, hey, we have the membership position, which my job would be to help convince, alumni to sign up for our specific chapters, you know, dues paying portion of the Alumni Association. So I held on to that position for about a year. But then in later 22 or 23, we transitioned as an alumni association to kind of that single dues paying entity, and then you're automatically a part of the local chapter. So that position kind of went by the wayside, and that's when the communications position, when it became open, and how I transitioned over to that role. So it went from membership to communications in a couple years span.
You are tuned into the Football Letter podcast. We're talking with Andrew Flatley, who I first saw. I'm sure it was at a basketball game, and I didn't know your name, but I just knew that you were so psyched and hyped at every men's basketball game. So I'm assuming, do you still watch the men's hoops team?
Oh, of course. And I think funny story. So I think the first time I met you, John, was or at least formally kind of knew of you, was Penn State upset Iowa. It would have been my freshman year, so February of 2016. They were number 4 in the country. We were unranked, and I jumped over the fence and jumped over the scorer's table to get onto the court, and it was a court drizzle. We will say, a couple years in hindsight, it was a court drizzle, and I think you snagged a video of it, and it was pretty funny seeing myself hop over the table. So somewhere that video is still floating around. But yeah, I do keep up with the hoops team. I'm really excited to see what Coach Rhodes is up to this year. Really strong first year that he had. So really want to see where they can take it to the next level, and hopefully make another tournament run here in 25.
Absolutely. Yeah, the video is somewhere in my archives. I mean, for like a millisecond, I thought about bringing it out here, but that was doing like freelance work for another organization.
You know which one I'm talking about?
Weren't you wearing like a multicolored?
It was the morph suit or whatever they're called, and the funny hair. Yep. And
Yeah.
right over the table.
Yeah. There was. We can still call it a court storming, or maybe a court drizzle. But yeah, Mike Rhodes. Yeah, I saw him on campus a couple weeks ago. Just he was walking around, and yeah, exciting times ahead for Penn State men's basketball. But yeah, had to ask you the Penn State hoops question. So.
Yep.
We'll ask you one or two questions about the chapter before we wrap up, but also just wanted to get to some kind of like quick hit questions.
Sure.
Favorite class that you had while at Penn State?
Oh man, so Mike Poorman had I forget what the actual name was, but it was like communications in sports or sports business or something like that. And I had that, my last semester, my senior year, and just to hear from all the connections that he had, he was bringing in guys from ESPN, from Fox, from all these big networks to talk about, their time at Penn State and how to transition them to these big name networks. So that was a really, really fun class. I'm fairly certain he still does it. So if anyone on here is watching and, needs a class or wants to take something that they will thoroughly enjoy, that was by far my favorite that I had in my 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. I'm almost positive Mike still teaches that class. I know that's a favorite for many students. We know
Yep.
Mike well. I mean, he's on the beat. He's also the director of alumni relations for the
Yep.
Belisario College, and so know Mike well, and not surprised to hear that. Yeah, he's got another favorite. That's a somewhat, I don't want to say somewhat, that's a very popular class, almost iconic class where
It is.
he'll have guest speakers come in from national networks all the time, and so that's a good one. Beyond the Legion of Blue, beyond the basketball team, you also worked with athletics, I believe, or you were doing some other things. I'm just wondering, what are maybe one or two favorite memories that you had, just Penn State athletics in general while you were a student here?
Yeah, so I interned for the marketing team, so under PJ and Alex at the time, and it was a lot of fun working various, smaller sport events. At that time, lacrosse wasn't yet in Panzer Stadium. They were still kind of on the hill there. And I remember one game, it was in March, so there wasn't a big crowd, but the marketing communications person wasn't able to make the game at that time. So they kind of had me running the show with Dean DeVore and, calling out what announcements to make, during the commercial breaks. And it was a really fun, 2 hours, again, not a big crowd, but to be kind of the one helping to run the show at a Penn State sporting event was neat. Same at a volleyball match later that year. I think it was a men's volleyball match. The guy that was doing the music couldn't make it, so I try to do my best Beaver Stadium impression doing the music during a men's volleyball game. Not even in Rec Hall. They got bounced to the smaller gym next door. So again, not a big crowd, but for me, it was a really standout memory that I won't forget. And just one of the things that makes Penn State and everybody involved with the school, really special.
Yeah, so many just impressive programs. Yeah, of course, now with Panzer Stadium, with lacrosse, it was
a monster. Yeah, it's an awesome stadium. Yeah, I haven't been back to it yet.
Yeah, you have to come back. I know what you're talking about. Like the student section, it might have even been called On the Hill, but I mean, people would just camp out, and they've had movie nights there, and it's so nice. I was gonna say, Andrew, you got to come back for hoop season. Could you ever imagine in our lifetimes the UCLA Bruins might be coming to the Bryce Jordan Center?
It's crazy. You're getting these big name, West Coast schools, USC, UCLA, Oregon's been decent, Washington's decent. Sometimes, it's really cool. All these programs that are iconic on the West Coast are now going to be like, playing in State College fairly frequently across all of our, 31 Division I sports. So it's really cool just to be able to come back and, hey, I'm going to catch this volleyball game, and it just happens to be Oregon versus Penn State. It's awesome.
Yeah, no doubt. One or two favorite campus spots that you try to hit up when you're back on campus?
When I'm back on campus, definitely the hub. I always liked as a student, spending time during the day in there. So just going back and sitting on those big High School Musical stairs that we called them. I don't think Chick-fil-A is there anymore, so I can't grab a Chick-fil-A sandwich. But checking out the bookstore in there is always fun. And of course the creamery. You can't beat getting, a pint of ice cream. I think I'm a mint Nittany guy myself, so mint ice cream with the Oreos. So I think when I'm back on campus, it's the hub and it's the creamery that I'm hitting while I'm there.
Yeah, can't go wrong there. So just a question or two to wrap up here then, Andrew, just to, not to summarize, but just to revisit a little bit about, kind of like your Penn State connection. When you look at the role that Penn State had on you as a student, the role that Penn State continues to have on you as an alumnus, and just everything else going on in your life, how has Penn State shaped you as a person and as a professional?
Yeah, I think it really helped to break me out of my shell. When I was in high school, and even my first couple months at Penn State, I was really quiet and reserved. Talking in front of a group of people wasn't my strong suit, not really something that I enjoyed. Through working with the athletics department and even taking the basic public speaking courses and, working with all different types of people really helped to build my confidence and my personality. So being able to then go out into the real world, having experienced, a lot of the time right now in my current position, I'm talking to architects and I'm giving presentations to architects, usually 15 to 20 people, nothing crazy. If I were to have done that, 7 or 8 years ago before I went to Penn State, I would have been terrified. My senior year of college at Penn State, I was talking to, 12, 13,000 people in the arena before every game. So talking to 10 or 15 architects isn't really a big deal anymore. So it gave me the ability to build up my confidence, break me out of my shell, and it helped me out professionally immensely. It helped me get my current position. So again, very appreciative of everything I've, learned at Penn State and all the people I've interacted with while I was there.
All right, and we'll wrap up with this, Andrew. Let's say I just moved to the Greater Boston chapter. I find out there's an alumni chapter. You and I are talking for the first time. What should I know about the Greater Boston chapter? For our Penn Staters listening, here's your pitch to them about why they should get involved and everything that your chapter is doing. What's your, just want to give you a chance to brag on the chapter a little bit and share about what you're doing.
Yeah. So I think our football watch parties are absolutely incredible. We're really overall a pretty young aged chapter where the energy in these game watches are fantastic. I think our THON events, if you were somebody that was involved in THON as a student, it's a really easy way to carry over. And we're always looking for help in making our Night of Hope even better. So we have an opportunity for you to help on the THON end of things. If you like doing social events, we're always out doing brewery tours or bar hopping or whatever it might be. And if you want to help out in the Greater Boston community, we do service events throughout the year as well. We go to the Greater Boston Food Bank. We make boxes for children in the hospital around Christmas time with toys and stuff. So, there's really a little bit of something for everyone. And you're going to meet other people in the chapter that have similarities to you. There's going to be people that live near you. There's going to be people with the same interests. And what's great about Boston is it's a very big small town. It's a city, but I think of it as a very, very large small town. You can meet so many people across the whole area and have easy access to them and all the resources Boston has accessible, which is fantastic.
Andrew, I had been looking forward to this conversation for a while. It did not disappoint. Thank you so much for stopping by the podcast and appreciate everything you're doing for Penn State and the Alumni Association. Wishing you and the chapter all the best.
Awesome. Thank you very much, John. Great catching up with you and looking forward to the football season.
No doubt. What's up, Penn Staters? Thanks for tuning into the Football Letter podcast. This week, we welcome standout volunteer leader Derek Turner. Derek is a 2017 Penn State graduate and the immediate past president of our Central Texas chapter. Derek still serves on the board there. And notably for us at the Alumni Association, Derek served as a line ambassador while he was a student at Penn State. Personally, I met Derek last year at Illinois. Him and his father, Dave, also a Penn State grad. They were in town for the game against the Fighting Illini. They continued their tradition of traveling on the road and watching the Nittany Lions across the Big Ten landscape. Had a lot of fun talking with Derek in a crowded restaurant/bar about his time at Penn State and with the Central Texas chapter. A little bit more laid back, relaxed atmosphere today on the Football Letter podcast. Derek, we're going to welcome you into the show. This is going to be a fun conversation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So when we talked, you called Penn State your dream school. Wanted to ask to start, how did you develop such a deep and meaningful connection with Penn State?
Yeah, it started early. My first experience with Penn State, I think my dad got tickets to a game through someone that he worked with, and it was 2002 Nebraska. I was 7 years old, went up there, and we got, I think I wanted to go to the stadium like 4 hours early. I don't have a ton of memories from that weekend. My dad tells it a lot, but slept over in the back of an excursion. And I believe up until 2019, that was still the highest attendance game in Beaver Stadium. So I'm sure someone will fact check me on that if I'm mistaken. But and I was hooked ever since that moment. The few memories I do have of that weekend, like I said, I was young, but it was just a place that was special in my heart. We go up there on the weekends and it was those 5, 6, 7 Saturdays, Friday, Saturday, Sundays a year were indescribable in the way that you feel when you pull into State College. And it was always home ever since.
We could do a whole show on the 2002 home game against Nebraska. Rich Gardner, who had the pick six, we actually had him on the show a couple years ago. You picked a good time to start creating memories at Penn State, Derek. Let's stick with that for another question or two. I mentioned your dad in the top, the Penn State connection there. Having him as part of those Penn State memories, having a parent who went to Penn State, and I can only imagine how many stories he shared with you, and then you became a student, and maybe you guys had shared experiences. Having a Penn State parent, how much did that impact maybe the memories that you made growing up, and then ultimately your decision to attend Penn State?
Yeah, it was huge. He graduated in '83, so he was there for the '82 national championship season, and it was always I had a very independent choice of where I wanted to go to school. My parents didn't force me to go to Penn State in any capacity, but hearing the stories that he had growing up, we'd go up to campus, like I said, after that 2002 game where he had tickets through work, we got season tickets after that. And so I'd always ask him to drive me around campus and drive me around downtown and, point out some of the areas where you lived or you had memories from, or tell me a story about you inside that restaurant or that store or whatever, or the classroom in that building. And it was just something that I wanted to learn everything I could about Penn State. I loved. For those who haven't been, if you haven't been to State College, there is just a different energy and a different atmosphere. And so going up, like I said, 5, 6, 7 weekends a year was just such a special feeling. And I wanted to know everything I could about Penn State. And then when it came time to choose a school, I was heavily considering pursuing West Point. I went back and forth, Penn State, West Point, pretty consistently my freshman and sophomore year of high school. And when it kind of came down to it, there was really no choice. I knew where my heart had been for many, many years. Okay.
So, Derek, you mentioned West Point while you were a student here at Penn State. As I mentioned at the top, you were involved with Lion Ambassadors. You also served in the Army ROTC. How did those two organizations, being involved with Lion Ambassadors and the Army ROTC, how did those experiences shape your student experience and maybe elevate it in a way that really enriched your experience here?
Yeah, I just actually had this conversation the other day with someone down here, and their child is thinking about making a choice of where to go to school. And I told them, at least in my experience, you can make a big school small it's hard to make a small school big. And Penn State does such a great job of offering opportunities for students to get involved and to make a big school feel like a small school in the social setting. So Lion Ambassadors and Army ROTC, I met some of my best friends in those organizations. Week 1 for ROTC, I mean, we all lived together on that 9th floor in Brumbaugh and East Halls, if you've ever been over in that corner of East. And then with Lion Ambassadors started my sophomore year. I just went to a wedding a few weeks ago for some of my ROTC friends, and it's been 7 years since we graduated, 11 years since we met, and we're geographically isolated because we were doing different things and being moved all over the country. So those friendships mean the world to me, and I'm so thankful for Penn State for connecting us, and then obviously for ROTC and Lion Ambassadors connecting us and giving me the memories and experiences that they did.
So making the leadership connection from those experiences to when you then became a chapter president, what were the leadership lessons that you learned at Lion Ambassadors with the Army ROTC that you found years later serving you well, and maybe you were leaning on them a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that people learn that's crucial to their leadership experience is that everyone is different. It sounds like such a simple statement that should not even be able to be, shouldn't need to be explained. But when you start to break down your own leadership style, and this was something that I had to learn, was we all have weaknesses as people, we all have strengths as people, and as a leader, a lot of times because you want to be seen as the strong one, you find yourself leaning into those strengths. But it's just as important to lean into those weaknesses that you have, because developing those weaknesses might be the difference between you connecting with someone you're supposed to be leading and not connecting with that person, not reaching them with your message that you're trying to reach them with. So embracing your weaknesses as a leader, I think, is just as important to developing yourself and putting yourself in a good path to help those under you and relate to them in a different way.
Very well said. And you said something interesting, like that sometimes the simplest things or the simplest things to point out are the ones that are most profound. I'm sure that there's a lesson in that in itself. When you graduated from Penn State, after graduating, you were stationed at Fort Cavazos in Texas. You finished your military service there, and then you stayed in the area, and you connected with our Central Texas chapter, which you and I talked a little bit about last year. Just wanted to, for the benefit of the audience and maybe exploring that a little bit further. First, how did you find the Central Texas chapter, and what was the impact of joining that chapter at that point in your life in terms of living in a new state, starting your career, and, just kind of trying to get, and even just making friends, as simple as that sounds?
Yeah, it was huge. I was fortunate enough when I came down to Texas after graduation that my roommate down here, as well as an additional friend in our apartment complex, we all were Penn State grads together. We'd all graduated same year, Penn State. We were all stationed down here. So we had a small Penn State community. But, as much as we love hanging out with each other and watching the games together, there's nothing like watching it with 150, 200, 300 other Penn Staters, right? So I think we looked up where to watch a Penn State game in Austin, Texas, or something similar just Googled it, and Central Texas chapter came up, and the watch parties came up, and we drove over, and I think we didn't find it till our second year here. So after going through an experience of only watching the games in your apartment with one or two other people, and then walking into a Penn State experience with, like I said, 300 other screaming fans in a bar, it was a shock to the system in a really good way. And we were able to connect with some amazing people. And like I said, I met people in 2018 that down here that are still my really good friends, 6 years later. So it was very impactful.
So you find the chapter, you walk in, you have your first chapter event experience watching the game. How do you go from that moment to getting involved on a more regular basis and then becoming the president? What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, for me, I found that when I'm involved more, I have a better time. Obviously, it's more work, but I'm able to make deeper connections with people. I'm able to learn so much more about the organization, about some of the challenges that it's facing, and maybe some of the ways that I can help. So I really didn't have the bandwidth to take on that role when I was still in the Army, and we lived about 45 minutes away from the watch parties and downtown Austin. So it was just a challenge to make those commitments. But my first year down here, living in Austin, post military, we were on the Penn State party barge. We do a boat every summer where we take everyone out and everyone gets to know each other. And the current president and the entire board was stepping down, and they just kind of made an announcement to everyone on the boat and said, "Hey, does anyone want to help?" Like, the entire board we've been doing it 5 years. We're ready to pass the torch. And myself and another guy who was next to me who I'd met that day, we both kind of raised our hands like, yeah, we'll help out, not knowing, we got a text 2 days later, said, all right, do you guys want to be which one of you wants to be the president? Which one of you wants to be the vice president? So it was kind of a shock, but it was great. And I'm so thankful that it worked out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you decide who was going to be the president and vice president?
Yeah, I was fine with either, and the other guy who you see in the picture next on my right in that picture right there really wanted to be the president. So I was perfectly fine with having him take on that role. And then about 7 months into that arrangement, he had some family stuff come up, and he was no longer able to kind of commit the time that was needed. And so I stepped in to the president at that time, and then held on to it for another year and a half or so, and then I just stepped down now.
A great example of Penn Staters being there for one another, supporting each other. I'm just sort of I wish I could have been there at that party at that moment, saying anybody wants to help out. You're probably thinking I'll show up a couple minutes early and set up some chairs, and instead it's the top line leadership. And of course you're a Lion ambassador, so you were very much prepared for that role. Can you maybe share a little bit of an overview of the Central Texas chapter? How much area do you cover? What does your membership look like in terms of the events, and maybe just what about the Central Texas chapter should Penn Staters know?
Yeah, so we do a big area. There's a Houston chapter and a Dallas chapter. So Texas, as you know, is a big state. So we get people from El Paso reaching out to us like, "Hey, you're the closest chapter in Texas." We're like, you're welcome to join. We're happy to have you, but you're a little way, you're 8-9 hours away from us. So we actually had a Penn State group down there ask us to come down and do a dinner down there with them, and so we would love to do it. Just wasn't possible with the time difference. But we do a lot of events that are, obviously football is the big one, and that's one of the ways we make a lot of our fundraising, which I'll talk about in a second where that fundraising goes. But we like to host things year round, obviously, and football is more of a social aspect, watching the games, but we have other events. So we just finished a minor league baseball watch night. We all went to the park, and we got discounted tickets for everyone who wanted to come, kind of a family oriented thing. We did Austin FC, the MLS soccer team here. We did one of those this year. We did hockey, minor league hockey. So we've done some family oriented events. We have a back to school barbecue for all the Penn State students that live in Central Texas that are heading up to State College. We'll have that here in a couple weeks. So we kind of have a lot of family oriented events, and we also have some social events that are more geared towards young alumni. And like I said, that party barge. We normally do kind of a back to the season, everyone get together and explore some of the downtown area here in Austin. And we're really trying to get more into the professional networking side as well. It's one of our big focuses here coming up in the next year or two, is to kind of build that base so that we are not just hanging out together and having a good time together, but we're really helping foster a professional environment here for Penn Staters and making it easier to find jobs and change jobs down here. And I mentioned our fundraising. So we do fundraise a lot at the football games. And we have a scholarship fund that we will put out a competition to Penn State students that live here in Austin, that are in Central Texas. I say Austin because that's where we're mostly based, but Central Texas. And then we'll have a competition to see which student has the best portfolio, and then we normally award a scholarship somewhere between $1,000 to $2,000 every year. So
a lot going on with the Central Texas chapter. Derek, let's stay with the watch parties. You mentioned fundraising for the scholarship. What is the atmosphere and the energy like at your game watches, and how do you use that as an opportunity to let folks know what else you're doing year round, in case maybe folks are seeing the chapter for the first time, or they want to get interested in beyond the watch parties?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very fortunate down here that we've partnered with Parlor and Yard. I'll give a little shout out to them, which is on West 6th Street here in Austin, Texas, and they're great. They do so much for us for our watch parties and for our events. So it really depends for atmosphere wise. So we're an hour behind the East Coast, right? So those 12 noon kicks for y'all are 11 a.m. kicks for us. And it is not always the easiest to convince folks to show up at the watch parties at 10:15 for Penn State playing Eastern Kentucky University, right? So those ones are no shade to Eastern Kentucky, but so those ones are a little bit more challenging. But for the big games, and we'll still have a great crowd, right? Obviously, but those are early mornings. But for those big games, night games especially, or a big opponent, we'll be at capacity, and it's a large establishment, and we'll have 300-400 people in there, 40 minutes before kickoff, ready to go, rocking and rolling, everybody wearing white. So it's great. We're fortunate that we can control the sound system at the watch parties. That we've partnered with the establishments. We can control the sound system on the outside. Got the game playing outside and inside, and we make announcements. So we do a raffle every game. We'll have prizes, whether it's a signed Saquon Barkley jersey or James Franklin football or a Penn State, a Penn State tumbler, Yeti tumbler or something. We'll have raffle prizes every game. And when we raffle those off at halftime, and we'll make announcements as well. Hey, we have this coming up. We have this event coming up. Please stop by and see us up here. We're selling T-shirts, or follow us on Instagram, sign up for our newsletter, stuff like that. So we want to make sure that we are fostering a fun environment, right? No one wants to bring the mood down by having a formal meeting at those times, but we also want to make sure that we're building for the future and recruiting folks to have fun with us and to network with us and to build a community down here, a Penn State community down here.
You are tuned into the Football Letter podcast. We are speaking with Derek Turner. Derek, you said one or two things I just wanted to stick with here. Partnering with a local establishment, you mentioned Parlor and Yard. Like, that's a great piece of advice for chapter volunteers across the country. Local businesses, they love Penn Staters. Game day, they fill it up, like you said, 300, 400, 500. And so it's great that you were able to, have an investment in that, in controlling the sound system, that you're able to have that much of a space. And so just wanted to, and there's a lot of work involved in that sense too. So wanted to give you a shout out there. You mentioned talking about, letting folks know what all you're doing at the watch parties, because you said you host events year round. Like, for you, when you were the president and, still being on the board in a prominent position, what are the individual conversations like at those watch parties where, somebody might be looking to you, in the leadership role, just like you were with the ROTC or Lion Ambassadors, and maybe they're looking for a little reassurance, or they just want to know where they can, get groceries in town. Those individual conversations during game day, how important are those in terms of, building the chapter and those relationships and letting folks know that you are there for them and supporting them?
Yes, so important, John. And before I even touch on that, I just want to touch on something that you said about local businesses love partnering with Penn Staters. We at Penn State, obviously every school thinks they're great, and no shade to any other school, no disrespect to any other school. We know we're awesome at Penn State as well. Two separate incidents last year during the back to the season kind of downtown fiesta that we held, and last year on the boat that we held, made a point to go up and say thank you to both the boat captain and a particular establishment that we were all at the time, and say, hey, thank you for having us. Hope no one was a problem or anything. And both times those folks said, this has been one of the best groups we've ever hosted, in terms of everyone being respectful and awesome. So that's not always the case everywhere, with every institution, everything. So like you said, local businesses do love partnering with us, and we enjoy being able to patronize them as well. Yeah, connecting folks, to get back to your main point, connecting folks is the whole reason we do this, right? So we have conversations on the board all the time, like, do we really want to, obviously we have a budget we want to stick to. Do we really think that this $50 or $100 or $200 is a good investment? Like, we could probably do something cheaper. And we always come back to, what's our mission statement? Our mission statement is to connect Penn Staters down here to make their experience a better experience, right? As well as to offer scholarship opportunities to Central Texas students. So that is, the watch parties are fun. The boat is fun. Going to soccer games and baseball games, like, all that is fun, which is great. But our intent and our main purpose is to create a second family down here in a comfortable environment for people that, that love Penn State. And as you can imagine, some of those watch parties are crazy. I love connecting people. It's one of the passions of mine to make sure people feel included. And between ripping off raffle tickets and taking Venmo requests and trying to write down everyone's number who's saying, hey, like I really want to get involved, or I want to do this, I want to do that. I might take 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers at a football game trying to connect everyone, and I'll get a text next day, and I gotta go like, all right, who is this? All right, okay, got it. All right. So, but that's awesome, right? That's so great. So that's something that we're passionate about down here.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have, Derek, and because you were in their position too, moving to Texas and being in their position, and you can relate to them. I'll follow up on the point that you just made. I wasn't going to share this, but when we went to Indianapolis in 2016, we were at Buffalo Wild Wings for our welcome event, and we won't say the school's name, but they play in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm not just saying this. The wait staff told us that we were so much more respectful and polite, and they were saying like, we hope you guys come back every single year. And it was just, but to your point, I think in all seriousness, there is a sense of pride in that mm-hmm. We love connecting with Penn Staters. You also want to treat everyone around you with respect and represent the school in a great way. And so I just wanted to follow up on your point, but thanks for sharing that. You are tuned into the Football Letter podcast. We are talking with Derek Turner. We are talking about connecting alumni in the Central Texas chapter, in the Central Texas area. So here's a follow-up question, Derek, and it sort of goes along with what we were saying. If I'm living in the Central Texas area, and I want to get involved, but maybe I'm not sure how, or maybe I live in North Carolina or Florida, what's your advice to a Penn Stater who maybe they move to an area, they want to find their Penn State chapter, they're not quite sure how to get started. Maybe it's as simple as going to a meeting. What's the value in connecting with a local chapter? And maybe what's some advice from you to a Penn Stater about, just one way that they can get started?
Yeah. So I'll start with advice, I think, because that kind of leads right in is, for me, it was Penn State watch party, Austin, Texas. Right. And I know that we've had a lot of people show up to our watch parties who are visiting from out of town. They said they did the same thing. You can also just search Penn State alumni chapter, Raleigh, North Carolina, wherever you're at. I know also Penn State Alumni Association does have a website that with all of the individual chapters listed with a hyperlink to their website, right? So that would be the how for me is just Google is your best friend, right? And I'll go that route. And if you truly are having trouble finding it, reach out to the Alumni Association itself, or you can reach out to me. Please go to psucentex.org and go fill out one of those information request forms. Say you're looking for an info on a chapter wherever, and we'll get back to you and we'll help you find it. In terms of the why, right? Like I said, I've been down here for 6 years. I have a lot of friends. I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of friends that are not Penn Staters, and they're awesome. They're great. But I think I had a little get together at the pool in my apartment complex a couple weeks ago, and of the 40 people, half of them were Penn Staters, right? And I know some folks who are not in that club that went to great schools. It's not that our school is better, but that are not in that club, they get jealous because we have our own language, right? Just like every school has their own language that you can speak. And so when you run into alumni from that school, so the people you will meet, right, are people that went through similar experiences, went through similar trials and tribulations in a similar place, right? Everyone remembers walking in December or January when the wind is whipping at about 30 miles an hour and it's 7 degrees outside, right? Like you can bond over these things and you'll make friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. I've made friends down here that I didn't know at Penn State. We might not even have been there at the same time, but we'll be friends the rest of our lives. And that's just so impactful. It makes like getting involved at Penn State makes a big school feel small. It makes a big city or a big geographic area feel small.
Derek, just so you know, I'm going to start using that line. Penn State, that was, and it's so true about the university, about the community. And so I just want to give you a heads up on that, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Go for it.
A couple quick hit questions for you, Derek, as we roll along here. What was your favorite class at Penn State?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I was a marketing major. I loved marketing, but I'm gonna go with astronomy, and I don't remember the actual number associated with it. Professor Lehman was my professor. He was awesome, and I learned so much. I mean, I wish I was smart enough to work in space and theoretical physics because that stuff is so intriguing, and I still to this day will just nerd out with at night with a space documentary about dark matter and binary orbiting star pairs and stuff like that. I just had never experienced any of that stuff before I took that class. So I'm gonna go with astro.
All right. Favorite campus spot that you try to hit up when you're back in town?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm gonna go with the IM Fields, which I know sounds silly, but I have some good memories of playing football out there with the fellas, in the snow, in the 100-degree heat, and so I'm gonna go with the IM Fields. They bring back some good memories out there.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the IM fields are it just, and especially in the summer when the number and the weather is nice. Yeah, no, that's a good selection.
I haven't been back in like 3 years. Are they still there?
They are still there. Most of them
Okay.
are still there. We're going to have some across the street on Park Avenue. We're going to have some renovations with Jeffrey Field, but on the opposite side. So yes, that at least as of 2 days ago when I was on campus, they're still there. So
Okay.
hopefully they're still there this summer. But yeah, I mean, folks would come back for We Are Weekend and we would say, yeah, lots changed over the last 50 years. Like, guys, I mean, 5 years seems like a lifetime now with all the changes, but yeah, look, change is good in most cases, and there's a lot of there's a lot happening. But yeah, they're still there, Derek. Good
Okay,
question, by the way. Favorite game. I was going to say favorite game that you've attended with your dad. That might be a hard one to pick. What future game are you most looking forward to traveling to, whether it's this year or another time in the future?
Yeah, we were supposed to go to USC this year. That was going to be our game. We go to one away game every year. I have a wedding that weekend in Austin, which I'm super excited for, with a Penn Stater, which is cool. So not sure about this year. In the future, I'm really excited to get to Oregon and Washington. I've heard great things about their campuses, and the stadium is supposed to be beautiful. And that's just good football too. So they're good teams. So I'm excited to get out there and do a little West Coast exploring.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'm a little more excited for Oregon and Washington than I am for USC and UCLA, to be honest. And they do sailgating at Washington, not tailgating. So that will be a new experience for Penn Staters. Farthest place from Penn State that you've heard a We Are or ran into a fellow Penn Stater?
I'm gonna go with two that are kind of the same. So first one, you showed that picture earlier of me with the Penn State flag with one of my friends. That was in Fort Irwin, California. Out there, we were having just a great time in the desert for a little while. He was a Penn State guy as well, so we've gotten a We Are out there. And then before I actually attended Penn State, I was wearing a Penn State sweatshirt summer in between senior year of high school and freshman year of Penn State, and I was hiking Half Dome Yosemite in California, and I got a We Are on 8 miles up the mountain up there in the middle of the woods. So that was a cool one too.
Was that before or after you had chosen Penn State as your college?
Oh, I was signed, sealed, delivered on that one already. Yeah, I was counting down the days till I could move in.
Favorite, so Saturday night downtown, you and a group of friends, you and your family. What place are you going to, and why?
Yeah, I think it was 2021. It took my grandmother, my dad's mom, so she has Penn State, fandom as well. I took her, my mother, and my sister to the first. And so we're probably going to the first. Some good memories there. And hey, when you're a college student, $2 is a lot of money. Not so much after you graduated. So always love coming back and partaking there.
All right. If you're going to the creamery, are you getting ice cream or a milkshake, and what flavor?
Yeah, milkshake, no doubt.
Yes.
Oh. Some combination. So it's vanilla, and then you have to get Oreos and peanut butter in there somehow. Whether you go cookies and cream and add peanut butter, whether you go peanut butter swirl and add Oreo, like you got to get them in there somehow. But milkshake with those two is the way it's going down.
Finally, see, I'm a milkshake guy, and like everyone that we've been asking, they're always saying, "Of course, ice cream." And so, yes, Derek, we finally got
Really?
one for so far.
John, you and me, we're going back to the creamery, man. I know it's, you're there all the time. I don't get I'm jealous, so we're coming back.
Absolutely, and yeah, and I'll pick it up. And they started selling them again finally. I thought it was one of those things that I would be talking about, 40 years from now with my grandchildren. The creamery used to sell milkshakes, and they started. So yeah, that's not that you need another reason to get back to Penn State, but certainly that's another one. Just a couple questions, Derek, getting back to the chapter before we wrap up. Looking ahead over the next, 6 months, 12 months, what are some things that you have planned, or maybe some things, recently that you're proud of? Like, I'm giving you a chance to brag about the chapter here. What do you have coming up that you're excited about, or over the past 6 months, what have you done that you're proud of?
Yeah, I would say retroactively, I think over the last 3 years or so, we really had a hard time incorporating families. A lot of our events were geared towards young adults and also, older folks as well, but not really families. So we've made a really big point, instead of having maybe one event or two events per year where families are included, of having 5 or 6 events. And one of those was the Austin FC game. I'm going to give him a shout out. I don't know if he wants me to or not. There's a former Penn State letterman who we didn't know lived in the Central Texas area, and didn't recognize him at first. And him and his family were sitting in the block of seats at the Austin FC game, and we're like, they're in our block. We're pretty sure they're with us, but we don't. No one recognizes them. So I went up and spoke to them and realized he was like I said, I'm not going to say any names, but he was a first round draft pick back in 2007, 2008, I believe. And I met him when I was 11, I think, at the time. He was signing books at the family clothesline downtown, and now he's down here and his family is here. So pretty cool. So I would say incorporating families is something we're pretty proud of. And then moving forward is we want to grow that support for Penn State businesses. So we typically do our back to school barbecue for students going back to Penn State that live down here, either in a park or at someone's house. We found and have partnered with a restaurant down here that is owned by a Penn State grad and his wife. And so we're excited to host with them this year and continue that pipeline of really making sure this is an all-inclusive chapter for families, for young professionals, for established professionals, and then growing that professional networking aspect. We're Penn Staters. We're always going to have a good time, right? We're always going to have fun. So that's not going anywhere, but we want to also make sure we're making it a holistic approach and all-encompassing approach to making it a smaller, feel small down here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Penn Staters get together. It's always a good time. Though, like you've said or alluded to, there seems to, most of the time be a deeper meaning, a deeper connection for when we get together. You mentioned businesses owned by Penn Staters. We're talking with Derek here. Late July, they just had Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis, in the St. Elmo's Steakhouse. I've never been there. I've walked by it so many times. It is sort of the famous go-to spot in Indianapolis, and it's owned by a Penn State grad. And so every time James Franklin and the Penn State crew goes out there for Big Ten Media Days, they go to St. Elmo's Steakhouse, which everybody goes to, but it's owned by a Penn Stater, which is really cool. And so, yeah. I mean, if you're living in the area, you never know who's going to own businesses. As Derek and I can tell you, Penn Staters are everywhere. So we'll wrap up here, Derek, by asking you this. When you look at your total Penn State experience, going to games when you were growing up with your dad, being a student here, continuing to stay deeply connected to Penn State as a chapter president and a board member, how has Penn State shaped you as a person, personally and professionally?
Wow, how much time do you have? That's a tough one to say succinctly, without being cliche and saying it's made me who I am today. But that's the truth. The friends I made, the experiences I went through, positive and negative, the education I received, and the path Penn State put me on when I was a student, and even before that, when I was a high school student wanting to attend Penn State, I wouldn't trade for the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think I had a Penn State room when I was like 10, everything, all the wallpaper and everything. So it's been a part of my heart for a long time, but there's something special about your alma mater. And so I wouldn't trade the experiences at Penn State for anything. And then post graduation, like I said, I've made such incredible friends. We were able to turn through the chapter a big city into making it feel small because we now have this community down here. Our hope is that we can continue to grow it and make it what we all know it can be, right? Always grateful, never satisfied in terms of growth. But without being cliche, it's hard, but I wouldn't trade Penn State for anything. And just even thinking about my experiences there and what it means to me makes me emotional. It really does.
How about this, Derek? We'll have you on the podcast again. We'll continue the conversation. We talked for 40 minutes and it feels like we're just getting started. And so kind of like what you're saying, there's not enough words that, that I can say to thank you for all that you're doing and how much I enjoyed meeting you last year and catching up with you here in the podcast. And so for now, we'll say, wish you well, Derek, and certainly we'll be talking with you again in the future and appreciate you stopping by the podcast today. Thanks, Derek.
John, thanks so much for having me on. And I'm going to hold you to that creamery, that milkshake.
Absolutely. Just let me know and we'll go there. It's still there. It'll always be there, but we'll have a good time there.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to catching up next time.
All right, thanks, Derek.
Thanks, John.